Are you caring for a loved one with dementia? You don't have to figure this out all on your own. Welcome to Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's, the show that helps you reimagine a new relationship with your loved one, a relationship a little more free of stress and anxiety. Join host Lisa Skinner and her 30-plus years of experience as she guides you on a new path to a better relationship with those you care for. Here's Lisa.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another brand new episode of the Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's Show. I'm Lisa Skinner, your host. There is a new study that just came out about a condition that may raise your early onset dementia risk by 24%. This is a story that came out in Eating Well magazine by Carrie Myers. I'm going to start off with what her takeaways of this study are. So this new study suggests that metabolic syndrome increases the risk of dementia diagnosis before the age of 65. In other words, early onset dementia. In some cases, you can reverse metabolic syndrome through healthy habit changes. Diet, exercise, stress, sleep, and socialization all influence metabolic syndrome and dementia risk. Metabolic syndrome, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, is a cluster of several conditions, and it's diagnosed in people who exhibit 3 of 5 conditions, including a high waist circumference, low HDL cholesterol, that's the good cholesterol, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high blood triglycerides. The prevalence of metabolic syndrome tends to increase as we get older. One study cites the rate at nearly 20% for those 20 to 39 years old, but nearly 50% of those age 60 and over. That's huge. Metabolic syndrome increases your risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. It also, unfortunately, increases your risk of developing dementia. While we often think of dementia and metabolic syndrome as being diseases of old age, there is evidence that these conditions may be on the increase in younger people. This connection and prevalence is an area researchers in Korea wanted to hone in on and learn more about. The research team published their findings in the American Academy of Neurology's journal called Neurology. So let's break down what they found. First of all, how was the study conducted? Well, the goal of this study was to investigate the association between metabolic syndrome in midlife, which is ages 40 to 60, and the incidence of young onset dementia. Young onset dementia, also called early onset dementia, is getting a dementia diagnosis before the age of 65. The researchers also examined which components of metabolic syndrome are most strongly associated with an increased risk of young onset dementia. So the researchers drew their data from the Korean National Insurance Service, which is a government-run health insurance system in South Korea that covers more than 99% of its population. The services include regular biennial health checkups that gather clinical and lifestyle data, income levels, and medical diagnoses. After initially extracting data for more than 4 million people, Researchers ultimately included around 2 million participants between the ages of 40 and 60 for this study who had undergone a general health screening in the year 2009. These participants were followed for an average of 8 years, and just over half of the participants were men. Of these participants, just over 25% met the criteria for metabolic syndrome. This included having at least 3 of the following: an elevated waist circumference of more than 90 cm in men and more than 80 centimeters in women. High blood pressure. The systolic blood pressure of more than 130 mmHg or diastolic blood pressure of more than 85 mmHg, or use of medication for high blood pressure. High blood sugar levels, elevated fasting glucose of more than 100 milligrams, or use of oral medication for high blood sugar. High blood triglycerides, or more than 150 milligrams, or use of medication for high triglycerides. And low HDL cholesterol, less than 40 milligrams in men and less than 50 milligrams in women, or using medication for low HDL-C. 60% of the metabolic syndrome group were participants in their 50s, and 40% were in their 40s. Men made up over 62% of this group. So researchers gathered the demographic and lifestyle data that were adjusted for during statistical analysis. These included age, BMI, smoking status, alcohol consumption, regular exercise, and their income level. In addition, they also gathered medical diagnoses of the participants that occurred during the study period, focusing on dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and vascular dementia. So, bottom line, what did this study show? Well, after running several statistical analyses, results suggested that metabolic syndrome in people ages 40 to 60 was associated with a 24% higher risk of all-cause young onset dementia, and all-cause meaning all types of dementia, a 12% increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, a 21% increased risk of vascular dementia, which is a type of dementia caused by damage to the brain's blood vessels, thus reducing blood flow and oxygen to the brain. In other words, having a stroke or a mini stroke. Researchers also broke the findings down for men and women. They found that men with metabolic syndrome did have a 15% higher risk of young onset dementia, and women with metabolic syndrome had a 34% higher risk of young onset dementia. In addition, being diagnosed with metabolic syndrome in the 40s increased the risk of young onset dementia more than being diagnosed in the 50s. And while all these components or risk factors of metabolic syndrome were associated with an increased risk of young onset dementia, the risk progressively increased with the number of components present. Researchers pointed out several limitations of their study. First, they cannot say whether their results extended to people outside of South Korea. They also did not include other variables that influence young onset dementia risk, like the presence of certain genes, family history of young onset dementia, history of traumatic brain injury, hearing loss, and education level. Researchers note that they also lack detailed behavioral and environmental data, which can also influence dementia risk. How does this apply to real life? Let's put it into real life terms. Now, we know that dementia is more than just forgetting someone's name or where you put your keys. It interferes with one's ability to think, with your ability to remember, understand, communicate, and reason. Over time, it diminishes physical abilities too, as the brain forgets how to do simple activities that used to be second nature. While influenced by genetics, the components of metabolic syndrome may be a result of lifestyle choices. And they're in the same lifestyle choices that also influence your risk of other diseases, including heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. And many of these diseases and conditions are linked. For example, type 2 diabetes has been associated with an increased risk of dementia. And healthy cholesterol levels reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke, as well as reduces your risk of developing dementia. Considering how all these conditions are intertwined, it makes sense that there might just be a common denominator here. Scientists believe one of them is chronic inflammation, which can have several causes, including chronic stress, poor sleep quality, poor diet quality, microbiome imbalances, and lack of physical activity. So, what this means is that certain lifestyle changes can help on that front too. With that said, nothing is perfect, and no one habit or combination of habits will guarantee that you will be free of inflammation or disease. But evidence does lean toward people with healthier habits being at lower risk. We continue to hear this over and over and over again. But maybe you're not sure where to even begin. What habit are you most likely to see the quickest success in? For example, do you enjoy a walk or a trip to the gym occasionally? Well, maybe just start there, gradually building a regular habit. Or if you've been wanting to branch out and try some new recipes, now could be a good time to add some tasty, healthy options to your food arsenal. For inspiration, you can find meal plans for just about any goal or condition. If you've tried everything to get a good night's sleep but are still struggling, you might want to check with your doctor or healthcare practitioner, because you just might have a sleep disorder like insomnia or obstructive sleep apnea. And they may be able to help you with specific strategies to help sleep come easily, because there is a correlation between sleep apnea and a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's. This is a known. So, the bottom line here, overall, this study suggests that individuals diagnosed with metabolic syndrome in midlife do have a higher likelihood of developing young onset dementia compared with those without metabolic syndrome. So, lifestyle choices and habits play a huge role in disease risk. Start today by doing one beneficial thing for your health and then repeat it every day. Over time, small changes can become big improvements. So, to me is a really compelling study. I mean, it's things that we are finding out that are truer and truer every single day. And now this one is suggesting that those links also apply to early onset dementia. So that's the information that I have for this episode of Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's today. I hope you find this very valuable, and that maybe you can just start with little baby steps by doing some of these recommended tasks and lifestyle choices and lifestyle changes to help reduce your risk of developing any of these medical conditions, but specifically today we're talking about early onset dementia. So that'll conclude this episode for today. I'm Lisa Skinner, your host. I really appreciate, as always, you spending part of your day with me, and that I am bringing you valuable information to improve your well-being and your health. So I wish you a great rest of your week, and I will be back next week with another new episode of the Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's Show. I'll see you all then. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's. We hope you found something in today's episode that helps. We understand that caring for a loved one with dementia can be the challenge of a lifetime, but you don't have to do it alone. If you're ready for exclusive access to even more great content and resources, head on over to Facebook and join Lisa's Minding Dementia Support Group. We're a community of like-minded caregivers, and we're here to help.